Welcome to the Leo Training Podcast, a podcast focused on scientific and real-world expertise on training strategies between your ears, behind the oar handle, on the field and court, and in the strength and conditioning room. I'm your host, Joe DeLeo. I am a strength and conditioning coach, speaker, and lifelong student focused on continuous improvement. Thank you for joining me, and let's roll to today's episode. Kris Robertson is the strength and conditioning coach for Rugby Canada and owner of Kris Robertson Training. In this interview, Kris and I discuss the pitfalls of chasing greater and greater strength. He shares how he trains his athletes and what program design elements he focuses on to gain improvements in both power and speed. We also touch upon jump training for speed development. Do you like rowing research? Do you value evidence-based practices to inform your coaching and training? Then let me tell you about my latest project. In August 2020, fellow rowing strength and conditioning coaches Will Ruth, Blake Gourlay, and I launched the Science of Rowing. Science of Rowing is a monthly publication that mobilizes the wealth of knowledge in academic journals. We provide coaches and rowers of all levels with practical applications that they can immediately put into use. Each month, you receive a plain language written review of a journal along with bonus video and graphic content. If you are interested in learning more about Science of Rowing, visit our website at www.scienceofrowing.com. You can download 2 issues for free. Now, on to the interview with Kris Robertson. Kris Robertson, strength and conditioning coach working with Rugby Canada. Kris, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to come on.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me on. Glad to be here.
My pleasure. So Kris, why don't you kick things off? Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came into the strength and conditioning profession, and your pathway to working with the athletes at Canada or Canadian rugby.
So I actually started off, it goes back to when I was in university and I was playing football. So American football for listeners that are overseas. But I started off there and it was after my first year. So I was fortunate enough to actually play my first year. And the biggest thing you have to understand is, like, in a contact sport, your body is kind of everything. So I have to really build up my body. So I needed to be able to train. So I needed to find a job where I was able to kind of continue my training, but as well as make some money to support myself. So my dad actually recommended, he's like, why don't you just try personal training? He's like, you've built yourself up to who you are now. I think you could possibly get clients that way. So I said, okay. So I got a personal training certificate. And I started training people at the parks. So I started there. I did that for a few summers. And then it ended up moving into a gym. We partnered with someone. And I started training general population. So I was like training, for the most part, it was like moms, dads, older people that kind of want to get in shape. And yeah, that worked well. Right through my university career, I was able to do that. So what made it really awesome was the fact that my training never was really affected. I trained like 2 or 3 times a day. And I've actually trained people in between that. So it just worked out.
Wow. Okay.
So then moving forward to my final year of university, I went to CFL Combine. I was drafted 11th overall to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And then unfortunately, I actually tore my ACL. So I tore my ACL, LCL, and posterolateral corner. So it was a pretty catastrophic knee injury. From there, I was still chasing the football dream. So I went out. I ended up getting cut after I came back from my knee injury. So I went back to school, finished. I got signed again by Saskatchewan Roughriders. And then I was released before training camp. So I kind of decided, this is 2 years now. So it's 2015. And I kind of had to decide, I'm like, do I want to keep going down this football path and chase that? Or do I kind of want to start a career, right? And I was 24 at the time, going on 25. And I kind of just decided, I'm like, listen, man, if football happens, it happens. But I I want a career, like, I want a wife, kids. I wanted that part of my life. So
Stability.
I chose, pardon?
Stability.
And yeah, that too, right? But yeah. So I chose the career. So I started off working as a fitness supervisor at a college here called George Brown. So I started there. And again, I was working with general population. And I was there for a few months, and I just realized, I'm like, this is not what I want to do. I don't want to just supervise regular people that aren't athletes. And when I call them regular people, just non-athletes. Mm-hmm. So I said, I got to find something new. So an opportunity came up with the Toronto Argos, which is a CFL team. And right there, I started off as an intern, and then I eventually got hired. And then I was there for about a year and a half, and then Rugby Canada called. Wow. So Rugby Canada called, and I've been there ever since. So I've been here going on 4 years next year.
Wow, that's fantastic, man. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
That's awesome. So they actually, like, unsolicited, they called you.
Who?
Canadian Rugby. They reached out to you.
So it actually works out. So we already know how this business works. It's about who you know.
100%.
So I interned under Dr. Matt Barr when he was at the Argos. And then he left for Rugby Canada. I was still at the Argos during that time. And then I would say maybe about 6 to 8 months later, an opportunity came up in Toronto to run our academy here.
Yeah.
And that's when he called me and he said, hey, there's an opportunity. I think you'd be good at this, which is something that you would be interested in doing. And I've been ever since then.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, to your point, it's all about relationships.
Relationships are so important, especially in this business. As a strength and conditioning coach, nothing is really linear. It's not like working at the bank or working at the hospital where you can kind of just see your way to, a management position. A coach could get fired in our business. There goes all your experience or whatever, and you have to go start hunting and finding something else. And there's not a lot of opportunities that our strength and conditioning coaches in the area.
Yep. Yeah. And that's a really important point you just made too, is that, if a new head coach comes in, they usually bring their own staff. So that's kind of one of the tricky parts, I guess, to navigating the professional ranks of the field. So real quick, I guess it'd be good to touch on before we get into power development, like this past year has been absolutely, unprecedented in terms of the pandemic. So what adjustments have you had to make in terms of training, guidelines or protocols in relation to health or cleanliness for the facility when working with the athletes? And also how has that factor into the actual training program, after a long layoff, the athletes coming back?
So during the pandemic, during the complete lockdown, so we were locked down here in Canada for about 6 months, where it was like complete lockdown. Everything's closed except like grocery stores and like essential services. So during that time, some of our athletes actually had a home gym, so I was able to modify some equipment. But a big thing that we focused on, because it was in the warmer months here, so from about February until April, it's a little chilly. But once you get to maybe mid-March, end of March here, you can kind of start going outside and doing things. So from that point right through until about August, we were actually able to go out. They were able to go outside and do all their fitness,
nice.
So running and things like that. And then it was just body weight program for those who didn't have weights. We did a lot of jumps, plyometrics, sprints. So that's kind of how we had to work. And then as for when we got back and we moved back into the gym, I want to say it was last week of July, first week of August, in that time period. And basically it was just, let's understand how to move again. I work with young athletes. So taking 6 months off in some instances is their entire training life. like, right? And then
Wow.
yeah, right. When you put it that way, right? And some of them, it's half their training life. So some of them, I've had some athletes that only started with me in September of the previous year, so September of 2019. So they don't really have much training under their belt.
Sure.
So it was just let's get moving again. So it's very, very general programming. I let them pick their own weights. So I wasn't prescribing percentage, nothing, because all that stuff's out the door, right?
Yep.
And and then we're just, really a lot of extensive plyometrics, a lot of extensive work, tempos, getting them building them back up, short to long in terms of our sprint progressions. And we were able to get 12 weeks of training in before we got shut down again.
Yeah.
And then we're going to start back next week, being the 16th or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. So, there's no playbook for this year. There's nothing to go off of. This is all, putting it up on the whiteboard and using a dry erase marker for it.
Exactly.
Well, that was very helpful. Thank you for the insight. So one of the first things that prompted me to reach out, you had this fantastic post on LinkedIn in regards to power development with the athletes that you work with.
Yep.
And you spoke a lot about kind of breaking the myth or moving away from this idea of needing a 2 times, body weight squat or 2 times body weight deadlift, that type of thing, in terms of your benchmark for strength, right? And the numbers that you are using are 1.25 to 1.35 times body weight.
Front squat.
For front squat. And it's different lift. So first, one, I would love to hear why you think or how you arrived at the 2 times body weight is potentially much more strength than is necessary, or you just found that didn't match up with what the athletes needed in terms of their power or speed development. And then what did you start to focus on more to continue to develop the power within the athletes?
So first thing you realize that is like strength is context specific. So, a power lifter, there's no such thing as strong enough in that sport, right?
Yeah.
Olympic weightlifting, same thing. You can never be strong enough. You always want to be able to continue to increase the load. So my context was strength for speed. So rugby sevens being predominantly a speed endurance sport. Speed is of the utmost importance. Faster athletes play at the national level. Faster athletes play more. Those kind of things. So, you read a lot of literature, talk to people, a lot of strength coaches, and there's always the 2 times body weight that is thrown out. But what I realize is that when I really dig deep into things, it's the 2 times body weight's more so from a health perspective. So keeping the stronger athletes are healthier athletes. So from that standpoint, I have different benchmarks for that. But with regards to speed now, what I did is I just ran a little study where I kept increasing their strength and testing their 40-meter sprint. That's really, really simple. I put them on a program. Okay, let's try and get stronger. Test, stronger, test, stronger, test.
Right.
And basically what I found is our athletes that were under that range of 1.25 to 1.35, like it's in around there. It's pretty broad, but it's a generalization. But I found that the athletes who went from, for example, and one athlete went from a 1.1 to a 1.2 times body weight squat, and she ended up getting faster. All right. Conversely, I had one athlete that started off at a 1.32 times body weight squat. We brought her to a 1.54 times body weight squat, and she got slower. So I was just like, what's really going on?
Sure.
Okay? So then it was a time period where I took we had athletes. I had 3 athletes that were all above the 1.25 body weight squat. And then what I ended up doing is I put 2 on a strength-based program where I was like, okay, our emphasis to get stronger. And then I put 1 athlete on a power-based program. And what I found out was when our strength increased after that 1.25, our speed decreased. Conversely, the power athlete, she got faster. So I fast forward now, right? Fast forward 6 months to when we get back to our COVID situation. Mm-hmm. And we're back into training. So we go through our first 4-week block where we're just, learning to move, get under the bar, get some load under us. Then what I did is I split our athletes down 1.25 and less strength. Over 1.25, you did a power program. Now, what ended up happening is every single one of our athletes got stronger, got faster, jumped further. And I just said, so I think I found something.
Cool.
So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Really and truly, it just comes down to just like my situation. I tested it out or tried it, and I saw good results. So our athletes, the biggest thing is our athletes got faster, they got stronger, and we did not affect their sport play.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Because as you said, speed matters, especially the higher levels you get to. So just to make sure we're providing full context and everything, for the audience, are you working with male or female rugby players?
Yeah, I'm working with female. These are all female
high
school age athletes.
Okay. So in your opinion, the studies that you've done kind of in-house, would you say that those strength standards are applicable to other athletic or sport populations that you have worked with? Have you seen that hold up across different sports?
Again, biggest thing you have to understand is when you're certain standards is it is specific to those groups. So like when you see correlations, for example, right? You read a study about correlations of strength and speed. It is specific to that group. And then you can't take that and then bring that over to your group. So my message to anyone is make sure you test this out with your group. So I found 1.25 to 1.35. You might find, hey, 1.15 works for me. And I'm like, oh, cool, that works. It's just not specific to my group, which is perfectly okay. So it's like really understanding like the principles in which I did the context in which I did this study, if you want to call it that.
Sure.
And try that with your own group of athletes. So in saying that, when working with other athletes, so I work with mostly contact sport athletes. So I work with football as well as rugby. Mm-hmm. And what I found in football is it is 1.5 to 1.6-ish front squat, body weight front squat. That kind of seems to be where that strong enough for speed is. So that translates to about a 1.7, 1.8 back squat in around there.
Okay. And was there a specific reason that you felt to prioritize the front squat over the back squat?
Yep. So at Rugby Canada, our testing battery is just front squat.
Oh, okay.
So I just know they're going to be doing that all the time. So I'm like, why not just use that versus doing the back squat? And then it's just like, okay, no, let's go do front squat. Like, no. So I just I know we're going to test that. Yeah. So it's good for reporting purposes, right? To report to our stakeholders, as well as to our, for our testing battery. And also too, like when I do teach squatting, I always teach a front squat first.
Interesting.
Just because I find one, you don't rely so much on your back for that exercise. Okay. Mm-hmm. And when working with young athletes, their technique will kind of falter, and when you start putting load on them, they'll use their back first before using their leg strength. So it's like, we want to build up the legs. Another thing too is Shoulder mobility is another thing. So if you can get into proper front rack position, okay, I know that's it's a lot harder than to do just back squat. So that's another reason I like it, and I teach. That's part of the first progression I always use. And then if an athlete doesn't have adequate shoulder mobility, that's a conversation now that, you know, we pass over to our athletic therapist. Okay, what's going on? What can we do to kind of get into that front rack position? Because it is my belief that unless you've had like some crazy shoulder injury, if you're a youth athlete, you should be able to front squat. If you are an older athlete, a professional athlete that has a 30-year-old professional football player or a 30-year-old professional rugby player who's been beaten up, hey, my shoulders just don't move like that anymore, that is different versus a 15-year-old that's just tight in the shoulders.
Sure. Yeah, it makes total sense.
How I think about it.
Yeah. So for that progression, Kris, would you start off athlete with no contraindications, go right to the barbell, or would you start them off with, say, a, you know, kettlebell or a dumbbell goblet squat to load the movement pattern and then go to the barbell?
Yeah, no. So before I even teach the squat, they have to hinge. So if they can't hinge, you don't touch the bar, you don't touch the goblet squat, period.
Okay.
Like that's how it works. The hinge, I feel, is like one of the most important aspects of learning.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
You got to hinge.
Yeah.
You know, I've in my private business, I've worked with athletes that, you know, they can squat the house, but I'm like, they couldn't even good morning the bar. And I'm like, that is a problem, and that's going to lead to future issues.
Yeah.
So, in saying that, so I teach with a dowel. I call it the 3 points of contact: head, back, butt. Perfect. Soft knees. Make sure you can hinge, and making sure that you're not using your back to come up. You're actually using your glutes and activating your glutes to make sure that you're coming into extension. So we do that first. Once they pass that, then we go to RDL. Then after you've done that, then I go to good morning. If you can do those three things, now you go touch the goblet squat, or depending on how I determine it, it's goblet squat or we go to the bar.
Sure.
Depending on our situation. So like, for example, during this COVID situation, I'll go to the bar versus the goblet squat just because a lot of places won't allow you actually to use dumbbells. So it's just like you have to stay in your stations.
Yeah, right.
Right? And they don't want any shared equipment. So it's just like, okay, let's just use the barbell.
Yeah.
And then we go from there.
So for that progression, when you're teaching the hinge, you have them go from the dowel and then they do their RDL and then the good morning. Is your thought process behind that, is that really one, trying to get them in terms of movement pattern to really like learn how to hinge backwards, to just move differently in terms of a squat pattern? They're going more vertical versus a hinge, just a little bit more horizontal movement through the hips. And then two, to really use their posterior chain.
Yeah. So again, use their posterior chain is like paramount. That's really important. But I look at it from if you've never lifted before, I think holding something in your hands is a lot easier than putting something on your back and trying to bend over.
Sure. That's a great point.
That's kind of how I look at it. So that's why I do the RDL first, right? And then all I say to them is like, do you remember how you did the RDL? They're like, yeah, I remember it. Okay, now just put the bar on your back and do an RDL. That's all I tell them. And then they're like, oh, okay, but they're like, it's a little heavier. I'm like, yes, just because of where the bar is, but it's the exact same movement. Then from there, when I go to the squat, I'm like, remember our 3 points of contact, head, back, butt. Cool. Now, keep those 3 points of contact and go down and bend. Bend your knees. I'm like, okay, cool. They do that, and then that's from there. It's usually that takes like a session, and they're good.
So in your experience, the pathway to the barbell, getting there, using the dowel rod, and then with the RDL and the good morning, having them actually hold something that makes that ramp of progression, that learning curve, as short as possible. Yeah,
I think.
Yeah. No. I'm just. Yeah. I like
specific
that.
to
That's cool.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
The thing is like, there's that famous quote. I don't know who said it, but there's so many roads lead to Rome.
Yeah.
Right. So what I do is may not work with you. You may teach another way, but are your athletes able to hinge? That is the foundational thing we're trying to look for. Yes. Cool. How you get there, I don't care. Right. It's just my method of teaching.
Yeah. No, that's great. I like that. I'm gonna play around with that. I think that'll be fun to do, because the hinge, when teaching it can always be really interesting if somebody's never done it before, and there's just this sort of like total lack of body awareness. They watch you demo it, you go over the drill sequence and how it's going to go, and then when they actually try to go and execute it, it looks like it's a squat. It's not a hinge movement.
So I'm a firm believer in like constraints-based learning. So what I'll do is they'll have the dowel and they'll be holding it behind them. So head back, butt, right? But if they're going into that squat, like you talked about, I get them to stand in front of the bench. So they stand in front of the bench and I say, don't let your knees touch that bench. Right. And then they go down and I'm just like, I get them to do like yielding isometric. So I get them to hold certain positions. So they'll hold midway down and then they'll hold all the way down. And I'm like, where are you feeling that? Oh, okay. I feel that in my hamstrings, a bit in my glutes and my lower back. Cool. Remember that. Let's try that again through dynamically. So we keep doing that. I'm like, do you remember that feeling? So I try and get them to feel it. That's doing it. I think is really beneficial for athletes, young athletes.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. And that's again, a really key point right there is for younger athletes, developing that body awareness, that usually takes a lot of time, but some of the things that you just described, the constraints-based learning, that's a really good way to shorten that learning curve.
Yeah.
Nice. So the kind of the second part of the power development question that I had for you was the other thing you mentioned in that LinkedIn post was how, as a young strength and conditioning coach, and I'm guilty of this as well, is we can fall into the quote unquote, the strength trap. And the answer, everything, we have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. The answer is to get stronger, and that's going to sort of fix everything or be the solution to what we're trying to go after in terms of physiological qualities. So why is that not the answer necessarily? More and more strength.
Because again, going back to strength is context specific. So you have to be strong enough for what? Again, last time I looked, there is no field, team sport, where a barbell is there. Your squat, how much you squat matters. No, it matters. Like, that's why I call them benchmarks versus KPIs. KPIs are key performance indicators for your sport. Benchmarks are just things that, like physiological standards. Yeah. So how strong you are, how fit you are for that KPI. I do feel you just need to figure out what is your sport, and that comes through reverse engineering your sport. So what is it that they do in the sport, and then build up those qualities. So, in our sport, we got a sprint, kick, ruck, maul, catch, pass. All right. So sprinting, that's one pillar that I found out. Kicking, I have other KPIs or other benchmarks, that I'm working through in terms of, split leg, split squats. There's a certain standard, a speed, a power measure, like all things I'm trying to figure out right now. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how I think about it.
Awesome. No, that's great. Did you want to discuss a little bit about jump training for speed?
Sure. Let's go.
Okay. Right. So I guess to start off, how can the use of jump training positively impact an athlete's speed and make them faster?
Well, how I think about it, where I look at strength in terms of like velocity. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing we can do with a barbell in the gym that's going to resemble moving at 9 meters per second. I just don't know anything that's going to get us to move that fast. You can't squat that fast. You can't even counter move and jump that fast. But when you're actually looking down that force velocity curve, jumps and throws are kind of closer in resemblance to, they get you closer to that speed number of 9 meters per second, as well as you look at ground contact times with certain exercise that you're doing. And in some instances, you have the horizontal nature of the jumps. So we found in our population, athletes who have bigger broad jumps run faster. And we've seen time and time again where if the jumps go up and the speed is the same or it's less, we know that the speed's coming. It's just a little bit delayed, but the jumps tell us something.
Interesting. Why would the speed be delayed? What would be a potential reason for that?
Just depending on where you are. Like if we just look at, block training, for example, so you have accumulation, transmutation, and realization phase. Sometimes what I've seen is if you go through a heavy strength block, the physiological adaptations that come along with strength, you'll get strong in the context of barbell weight, but sometimes it takes a little bit of time for you to, the fatigue from that strength work, so the amount of volume you had to do to get stronger, you need to be able to recover from that, and then that's when you're able to realize it. So I've seen it before where we've gone through, a heavy strength block, or 2 in a row, like we've gone 6-8 weeks of strength work, and our jumps slowly get better, and then our speed will go backwards for a bit. And then once we get out of that strength block, we go focus on power, we drop the volume a bit, speed just goes boom. The next month they're catching up and they're faster.
So that actually, you just made a really, really good point. And I think this is important for athletes to hear and potentially coaches too, sport coaches, is you talked about during that heavy strength block that they actually went backwards in some of those physiological qualities. So at the time, right, they may have lost some speed, but down the road, when you kind of shifted gears, all of the work that they put in benefited them. It took a while to kind of bubble up to the surface, to come to the surface. So it's not really possible to train every physiological quality all at once, right?
No.
So you have to.
We have monsters.
So we have to pick things to focus on. So I guess the trade-off is that you have to kind of come to terms with it, being okay with not being able to be excellent at everything all the time.
Yeah. So I actually just had this conversation with an athlete the other day. Recently we've been doing some speed velocity speed velocity profiling, where we're profiling athletes. And in the last 3 weeks, he's dropped a 10th off his 40-yard time.
Wow.
Right. And that's not really the athlete's he's slow. He got faster, but it's still slow. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So it's we want to move into the fast realm. But basically what I told him, I was reading something where athletes from grade 9 until their professional career in football, athletes will get maybe about 7% faster. It's very, very slim. It's not that great of a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't see many people go through speed training and drop a second off of their 40-yard.
Right.
A full second. You're not going to see, you don't see that much. You'll see that maybe in the higher ranges. So for example, a kid that runs let's say a kid who runs a 5.2, he's not going to run a 4.2. barring something miraculous happening. I haven't seen it. Again, I reserve the right to be wrong. So if anyone's listening, I reserve the right to show me your data. Cool. I'll say I was wrong, but it's not something that you see.
Yeah.
Barring that, technique and all these things are accounted for.
Sure.
Like you can change someone's technique and you can drop a 10th in a session.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like barring that, once the technical abilities are there. Sorry, say that. Ask the question again.
So you were discussing the conversation you had with an athlete in regards to essentially not being able to train all physiological qualities.
Yes. I apologize. So in saying that, my conversations with them, I'll explain to them, and I kind of have a graph that I'll show them in terms of like, we have an athlete, we took in 2.5 years, we took 5/10 off of her 40-meter time.
Wow.
So he went from a 5'8", which is good. I think she was like 13 or 14. So 5'8" these are meter times, by the way. It's not 40-yard. Meter time, so 40 meter. 40 yard, for those who don't know, is 36.6 meters. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a couple extra in there.
There's a little bit of time distance. And we brought her to a 5'4". Okay. And that took 2.5 years. And it was a slow bleed. So it started off, we first started training, it went 5'8", 5'6". Okay. Then it goes 5'6'2". It hovers around there. Then it goes, all right, 5'5", 5'6". Then she goes back up to a 5'7", drops back down to a 5'6", jumps up to a 5'8", jumps down to a 5'5". Okay, now we're year 2 now. Cool, we're at 5'5". It goes up to a 5'6'1", drops down to a 5'5'1", goes back up to a 5'5'8", drops back down to a 5'4'9", and then we finished off, I think it was a 5'4'7".
Wow.
And it's kind of where she got. And yeah, it's a roller coaster of a ride.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Speed is so, you plan for it. It's a very tight window. Generally, you're not going to be peak speed all year around.
Yeah.
Right? So I tell athletes, I'm like, we can get you 100% stronger in a 5-year span, where we could only increase maybe 5 or 6% in a 4-year span.
For speed.
Yeah, for speed. And if you see that, go to any college or university, any football team, and you'll see something very similar.
Wow, that's awesome.
Where athletes are not getting it. Speed doesn't work the same way as strength.
Right.
And I think that's another reason why, like, as strength coaches, showing the athletes showing people that we are to our stakeholders that, we did get them stronger is good, but that's easy compared to speed. Very easy compared to speed. Getting strong is not very difficult.
Right. So speed, what would you say the same about like other physiological qualities, like change of direction or agility or vertical jump? Or do you think speed's the most difficult?
No, I think a lot of those depends on what the kind of test you're doing. So if you're doing like a 3-cone drill, something like that, those are drills I don't even tend to focus on. So I prefer to work on, I give them tools to add to their toolbox so they can address the technical, tactical part of their sport. So measuring the change of direction really is not something that I do, just because of how variable it is in terms of our sport of play. Right. So it's very open-ended, and it's nothing's really closed. So it's like you have to make decisions. And that's when we work with our sport coach to kind of figure out, okay, we want them to be able to step a certain way. So we build up the tissue qualities and explain how to do that movement, and then they apply it to their sport.
That's great. That's really good insight. Kris, this has been fantastic, man. Do you want to touch upon a little bit about the Complete Performance Center that you just partnered with, and give people an idea of where they can find you and how they could reach you if they want to get in contact with you?
Yeah. So Complete Performance Center, or CPC, is a partnership I started with an old mentor of mine. He still is a mentor, but he kind of helped me get through university, gave me some good advice. He was doing exactly what I wanted to do. So he was a former professional athlete. We played the same position. And he then retired and started a fitness business where he was training people out of the park. He started there, and then he's worked his way up to get to this facility. So a 30,000 square foot facility, indoor field house. And basically, he just wanted to solve the problem. In Canada, we don't have many training places. So a lot of athletes will have to go to one guy for speed. They have to go to another guy for strength. Football drills, you got to go to another guy. He just wanted something that was all in-house.
Sure. Yeah.
That's kind of his idea, his dream. And he now has moved over to the business side of things. And he then brought me on to kind of run the football side of things. So that's where I'm doing a lot of experiments with regards to speed and strength for football. So that's going to be coming out soon. Look out for some posts on that.
Okay.
As for where people can find me, you can find me on Twitter. So Coach K Strength. You'll put these in the show notes, I'm assuming.
Yes.
At KRob23 on Instagram, and then LinkedIn is just my name, Kris Robertson. And then I would just say reach out to me on those, and I respond back on those quicker than I would respond back on emails.
All right. Awesome. Kris, is there anything else that you would like to add before we wrap up?
So I'll be having some courses coming out soon. Nice. In the new year, to look out for that. I'm really I'm targeting and talking to a lot of young strength coaches, and I'm a young strength coach myself, but there's a lot of strength coaches that are just coming out of university and sometimes don't know where to look. I was kind of in that boat. Where do I go for resources? So I want to create a platform and a place for coaches to be able to, what are some good books I should start reading? Those little things, and kind of help them guide their thinking. I've had some really good mentors that really helped me. And I just, again, this is a business where you pass along everything, right? I'm not all about this hiding stuff. Someone has some secret exercise that they created, or no, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that, right? It's an art. I can give you the recipe, but you have to know how to apply it, and that's specific to each individual. Going back to the context of hinging, I teach it this way. You may teach it another way. Another coach may teach it another way, but they all got the same result.
Yep.
Right. So it doesn't really matter. So that's one thing that I really wanted to focus on. And that's kind of the gist of it.
Awesome, man. Well, be sure when that stuff is available, I'll update the show notes and stuff, and make sure to include that. And we'll keep an eye out for it. And I'll include the social media links in the show notes so that everybody can find you as well. But it's been a pleasure. I really, again, thank you for coming on. really enjoyed the conversation and you being so open and candid with your experience and sharing what's been successful for you working with Canadian rugby athletes.
I appreciate it, and I'm glad to see everything that you're doing, this platform that you provided for a lot of athletes and coaches that can learn from. So good on you.
Thanks, Kris. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you for listening to the Leo Training Podcast. If this content is important to you, please be sure to rate and review so more people can listen. Also, you may follow me on social media, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook to get weekly free content. For more in-depth content, please subscribe to my email newsletter at my website, leotraining.io. Be sure to check out the resources page to download free, helpful content. If you have any questions or feedback, please contact me directly by email at joe@leotraining.io or via Instagram. The handle is @leotraining. Thank you again for listening and have a great day.